say it's philosophy from above or from below. So I would like to thank Raphael for inciting me to approach those issues from a philosophical perspective. And I have to say, I did not expect to have so many philosophers in the audience. I thought there would be mainly historians, and I feel a little bit embarrassed and impressed, because I prepared something which was, philosophy for dummies, and instead of that, there is Paul, there is Stephen, so it's a little bit unsettling. I wanted to start by the attraction and limits of philosophy in this realm of the understanding or explanation of mass crimes, and with the fact that philosophy has both relevance, but in a limited way. I would like to focus, to underline, and the main point is philosophy to have something relevant to say in this realm as to fight, I think, two philosophical tendencies. The one is the tendency to generalize and look for general definition and theories, and so look for general approach of genocide, whether it is structure, eliminative intention, radicalization, or situation, and the tendency to be an asylum of ignorance or incomprehension. In the ethics, Spinoza makes fun of the superstitious people who is always looking for the last reason of things and the last causes, and who end up claiming it's God's will. And in a certain domain, we find that the last because is treated, the last word in the last because is granted to philosophers who are in charge of giving the meaning of what seems to be impossible to understand. That was this has been the case, maybe less in the States, but in France and in continental philosophy, this has been the case very much of Arendt's approach of the banality of evil, where it was used as the last explanation. And in the end, people would say, well, that's a banality of evil. And we even find that this attraction of philosophy has been used by clever minds, where you see Browning quoting Milgram and then Arendt, and then you have like a series, Browning, Milgram, Arendt, all pointing to the same thing, and in the end, it's the banality of evil. There are many drawbacks in this approach, and these two philosophical tendencies are, I think, useless and counterproductive to address the issue of mass crimes. You might, if we were not among philosophers, we would say, well, who cares about philosophy, and let's go, to real business. And, art science, psychology, or history. But we find that those tendencies emerge also in social sciences, not only in philosophy, and that the anesthesia of philosophy, or what we are looking for in philosophy, is not so easy to escape, since you find that historians also use those explanations, or social scientists like Browning, I already quote, even if it's really short, also Zygmunt Bauman and Enzo Traverso and others. So the type of approach I would defend in philosophy would be closer to first a Wittgensteinian approach, where Wittgenstein was saying it's more important to understand the difference between type of numbers than to have a general definition of numbers. And I would say it's more important to be able to approach the difference between Auschwitz and Sobibor, or between Babi Yar and Srebrenica, rather than to have an approach of genocide in general. And I would also defend an approach which could be close to Quine naturalized epistemology, rather than it would be socialized epistemology, that is being in the boat of human sciences to change the planks little by little and progressively from the inside, without being able to have an outside look or a view from nowhere. And why is it important to have this approach? It's because a certain differentiation between situations, genocides, and cases cannot be done only in conceptual terms, at least not in certain conceptual terms, which are those of moral philosophy. Well, in those matters, most of us would grant that the greatest part of the job of understanding what happened during the Holocaust in Germany was mainly brought by historians rather than philosophers. So what is the last realm of philosophy where philosophers can have something relevant to say? Most of the time, as compared to social sciences, it's the realm of morals and norms. Well, in this realm, facing mass crimes, we don't have much to say as philosophers, and there are good reasons for that. It's because genocide are morally unthinkable. And what I mean by that is that there is no serious discussion in philosophy, at least in our academic circles, about whether or not we should commit genocide. And but it's not only in our academic circles, it's that genocides are not justified. And for those who try to justify them, they never do it directly. They try to minimize them. So as Vidal-Naquet, a famous historian in France, was saying, negationism has replaced a moral skepticism. Mass crimes are not justified, they are minimized, and the question of how many, are you sure that so many people were killed, has become the modern version of, is it really so bad? So the negationism has taken the part of moral skepticism or relativism. And the second limit of moral discourse is the absence of possible differentiation. The moral discourse is roughly the same to qualify the genocide in Germany or in Rwanda. And we will say it's atrocious, inhumane, monstrous, unthinkable, not possible to justify, absolute evil. But we don't have much more to say except going in the social sciences and using their vocabulary to make specific differences. And we have there not only a moral limit, but a logical limit. We cannot express in moral terms we cannot wonder or ask if it's better to have been the commander of Dachau or Sobibor, if it's better to have been Eichmann or Eus, or if it's better to have committed genocide in Rwanda or in Cambodia, to have participated in the massacre in Babi Yar or in Rwanda. So there is a real limit and poverty of moral philosophy. We can add up blame on blame, but cannot go in a differentiated, relevant discourse about those genocide, the motivation of their agents, and the dire straits of the and misery of the victims. But nonetheless, even if moral philosophy cannot do it, we need to do it. We need to be able to say that Theresienstadt was not Auschwitz, that Srebrenica was not Rwanda, and that it was not the Khmer genocide either. And so in facing this, that what is for us and morally unthinkable, we have to move on the side and go in the boat of the social sciences, using the work of historians, because it is historians who are able to address the issue of the morality of the genociders. It is Hilbert or Yuan Chaput who were able to actually articulate what could be the morals of the German bureaucrats or ordinary Germans. And these displacements mean that we have to go, we have to consider issues of knowledge, truth, historical truth, and also address the issue of the morality of the genociders, the perpetrators, but used not as our possible morality, but as the study of the morality of others, their justification, either during war or genocide times, or in court after the war when there was a judgment. And so this has led me to to go in and do social sciences, work with social scientists, or myself do social scientist work in two main directions. One is doing field work in Bosnia after the war, where I interviewed victim association, people who testified in the Hague Tribunal, the International Tribunal for a criminal tribunal for former Yugoslavia, witnesses for defense and for prosecution, and the few convicted criminals who came back from the Hague and who came back to live in Priedo. So most of those interviews were in Priedo and area. And also a study of the investigations and reports on Srebrenica massacre. That was part of my work. And another one is using this material to shed new light on the Eichmann trial. And that was based mainly on archive and a type of sources which have been really not so much used, and I will explain what it is. I could say that part of my work has been to address fake, unfounded generalization and the transportation of arguments from one context to another. Let me check. What time did I start, Raphael? Je t'entends pas.
Around 7 or 7:08.
Non, mais 7 quoi?
4:07.
J'ai quoi?
4h07.
D'accord. Okay. So the study I tried to work on the Eichmann trial, and I will first start with this study on the Eichmann trial because it shows the limits of philosophy and nonetheless how philosophers can be useful, mainly to fight against other philosophers. There have been a lot of criticisms concerning Arendt's account from historians, very good criticism from Raoul Hilbert, from Cesarani, from Chapoutot. I entirely agree with critics of Paul in this Heart of Darkness. And we showed that it was empirically false, and that most of that mainly her vision of Eichmann was the projection of her previous conceptions of totalitarian system and the totalitarian man. That was done. The second thing I showed, what I showed a little bit more precisely, is that I was in better position to address the philosophical part of it and to address this supposed banality of evil and thoughtlessness. I do not think of the Eichmann doesn't think. And I showed that it Arendt very strictly followed Eichmann defense, even in the idea of the banality of evil, because it is Eichmann who himself says, I do not think. He is put in he tried several ways of defense, and he tried most of the usual ways of defense. And he tried to say he did not know, and he was shown proofs that he knew. He tried to say he had no intention, that everything. So at the end, the judges, because he was trying to escape by all ways, the judges asked him, well, you have three options. Either you wanted, or you did not want, or you were indifferent. And if he wanted, if he had the intention, he was accusing himself. If he did not want, then it means if he had, if he didn't want because he knew it was bad, then he was showing that he had the knowledge and conscious that he was wrong. And he was also accusing himself in the terms of the Jewish system, where the defense by the obedience to order was falling if you knew that the orders were wrong. And if he was saying that he was indifferent, then he was condemning himself in the face of history, because he would look like a monster. So at this point, he said, well, I did not have any thought. I didn't have any opinion. I did not think. So it is clearly manifest when you look at all the transcripts that the issue of lack of thinking, lack of thoughtlessness is part of a strategy of defense, where Eichmann didn't have any other way if he didn't want to acknowledge the wrongness of Nazism. Then I also showed that there was the banality of evil had an emotional, it was more emotional than conceptual. When you, and then I unearthed, I mean, my sense was that it was more an emotion, a sense of relief of Arendt to notice that Eichmann was only that, a feeling which is very common for victims who arrive in court. But how could I know what were the feelings of the audience in the Eichmann trial? Obviously, I wasn't there. So I used what in France we call les chroniques judiciaires, which are the reports of journalists specialized in following audiences in court. And a lot of them wrote, I mean, the best of them were in the Eichmann trial. Several wrote very good articles at the time, and they also wrote books. And then you find that their analysis of the trial also show at the beginning shows a guy who was just ordinary and banal, and Arendt sees the same thing as everybody else. But also they show that Eichmann is very complex because they attended the whole trial, which is not the case of Arendt. And they showed that a guy was able to defend himself, very clever, very smart, very agile intellectually. And also the growing outrage of the audience, who just could no longer take it. This guy was always eloping, trying new ways to escape, and never addressing the issues that were actually raised by the judges or the victims. And so at one point, they are just like, I mean, who is this Eichmann? Who is this Eichmann? And they end up at one point either giving up, or, and the best account for that is the poet Haim Guri, who wrote Dans la cage de verre, in the glass cage, where he said, well, I no longer, I gave up. I cannot not understand him. And there are other reactions, those of other people or the judges or Arendt, who decide, I don't want, this guy is not like me. I want to put him in the distance. He lacks something. And you find that in each case, the person is explaining that Eichmann lacks what is the best thing for this person. So for the judges, he lacks courage. For others, he lacks character. And for Arendt, who is a philosopher, he lacks thought. And so every time, Eichmann lacks what is best for the person who is judging him. But what it doesn't say anything about Eichmann. It just says something about the need to be consoled and to be saved. And so the need for salvation. So finally, it's pretty easy to show that the banality of evil is just the duplication of the old metaphysical scheme of theodicies, where evil is non-being. And the incredible picture we have of Eichmann was devoid of everything. He doesn't have memory, doesn't have, he doesn't have a thought, he doesn't have initiative, he doesn't. Is just a picture of the non-being in a very traditional philosophical tradition, and with the very common tendency in theodicies, which is to save our best principle, which is thought in that case. Because if Eichmann doesn't think, then not only us who think are saved, but thinking will save us. So it's pretty easy to see, to use a very basic Carnapian method, where you distinguish the empirical facts, which can be either historical or emotional, a process of generalization going always farther from empirical context, a grammar or syntax, that of the paradigm of theodicies, and an affective dimension, emotional dimension. And you, in this way, can easily show that we have the perfect construction of a false concept and a nonsensical problem in philosophy. What is also very important is to use in philosophy the historical method of criticizing court and judicial sources, and to never use a defense as a description or an event or an emotional state of affair, but mainly as a way of defense, because it's what Eichmann was doing. Actually, I don't know if you saw it was yesterday that they found the Sassen tapes where Eichmann was bragging about his victory of killing many Jews, but not enough to really enter history in the good way. So that's where philosophers are useful, because as clever as our historians, they do not dare to enter the domain of metaphysics. They could. I mean, there is nothing very mysterious about that. But they do not find that they are legitimate to do it. And we, in a way, need the legitimacy of philosophers to be able to prove that it's only very old metaphysics and nothing new about a conception of the evil of modern times. The second part of the creation of argument and the transfer of arguments I would like to stress is the fact that I was very surprised to see that certain Eichmann arguments, we were supposed to express modern genocide of our times, were completely absent in Bosnia. And particularly what was absent when I spoke with convicted war criminals, none of them defending themselves, saying that they were cogs in the machine, that they were part of the system, or they did not even defend themselves by saying they obeyed orders. For obedience to orders, easy to understand. It's just that it no longer works in trials, but not only that, but that there is an incubation, which is for command responsibility. So if you say that you obeyed orders, it means that you are the commander. And if you are the commander, it means that there was a hierarchy. And if there was a hierarchy, then there was a system. And then that's why there was no cog in the machine, because, I mean, it took me quite a while to understand. But once one of them told me, I was alone in the room, I didn't see anyone, I was in no system, and I was like, yes. They were all accused of joint criminal enterprise. And when you're accused of joint criminal enterprise, at a time when the ICTY did not prove the system, then you prove the system and you accuse yourself. So all what is considered as, blaming the system, blaming the orders, just disappeared because it was self-inculpatory. Also, what was interesting is that those arguments, which were very characteristic of Eichmann defense, migrated toward the persecution. For instance, in Srebrenica, all the arguments of logistics, where buses had replaced trains, were part of the argumentation to prove the genocide in Srebrenica. Also, because you need a systematic crime to have a genocide. So it is very interesting to see that what we thought and what is sometimes presented as traits of modern crimes were just part of argumentation for defense and could be used one way or another according to the change in the charges in the trial. To prove you the frailty also of this transfer of arguments, concerning Srebrenica, there was a huge report of historians, Dutch historians who wrote an enormous, there are 7,000 pages about Srebrenica, where it ends up in a conclusion that the Serbs ended up killing the prisoners because they were faced with too many prisoners. They just didn't know what to do with all those people, you know? I mean, and they found a solution. Oops, they killed them. So you just wonder, I mean, where does this come from? Well, it comes from a transfer of arguments from historiography of the Second World War and the Arendt's type of explanation by logistic, which has been used by the historiography of the what is called, at least in France, l'historiographie fonctionnaliste, where it's a system, the dynamics of event which will lead due to structural problems of logistic, lack of food, to mass crime. And what is interesting in this case is that this process of which is in between functionalist historiography and radicalization historiography, you are in certain situations that will lead you to take certain turns, and that will lead you to put people in ghettos and to end up killing them in the end, took years or months. And in a situation of real shortage of a lot of food and a lot of things on the East Front in Germany. And it's supposed to take place in 2 days in Srebrenica, when there are NGOs all around ready to bring food to the prisoners. So you will, according to me, it's just completely absurd, and in that case, very a lot of bad faith in this argument, because the point of the argument was to show that the Dutch soldiers had no responsibility in the massacre. Nonetheless, it is very interesting to show that the credibility of this transport of argument is based on supposed categorization of or historiography of genocide, where what is supposed to work for Germany and the Holocaust could work for Srebrenica. My point there is to criticize this kind of analogy and to show that it's just hasty explanation, not taking at all into account the real dynamics and specificity of the event. So I would like to stress the frailty of many philosophical debates around those issues. For instance, about obeying orders. There were so many. Sorry.
Je pense qu'il faut que tu conclues.
Je vais conclure. There were so many discourses about obeying orders and whether or not you could escape obeying orders, where in the end, most historians showed it was not a matter of obeying orders. And but I have to conclude, so we can engage discussion. That my point was also to say that it's the reason why I have some doubts about the use that Paul is doing of the notion of situation in his argument, because well, what counts as a situation? And I would say no criterion of identity, no entity. And when we consider that it's question of situation, then why is it that we don't have the same situation in Germany at the beginning of the war and during the war? Why is it that Prijedor is not Srebrenica? And why is it that there was a genocide in Srebrenica and not in Žepa few days later, few kilometers away? Is it not the same situation? So I fear that I to finish my I have and it's to, I mean, to have the discussion about that. I fear that we end up having a reification of the idea of situation, which ends up having a causal explanation. Well, it is a situation it explains. In French, we have this expression, la situation a dérapé. Oui, mais no, it's the people in the situation who ended up doing the things, not the situation itself. And also, I'm wondering if the issue of situation doesn't have the same drawbacks as the banality of evil and the idea of structure, erasing the dynamics of events, erasing temporality, erasing the specificity of war times, and also the fact that situation is a very useful way of defense, and it's used by an accused in Browning. It's not the same situation, but maybe he could have said those were other times. And finally, my other doubt is I'm fearing that in a little bit as in the banality of evil, we end up with a dualism and unfounded dualism between perpetrators, those who, you know, follow the situation, and order givers. And we, in most of those genocide situations, we see that the difference is not that clear. In Prijedor, the guards were both accused of beating the prisoners and of being superiors to other people to whom they were giving orders. Most of the time, you are both the one who receives orders and the one who also gives orders. So that was my, I mean, my attempt to launch a discussion about this issue. Where I'm and just maybe one idea of what counts at the criteria of a change of situation. And I'm not saying it will work for every case, but why is it that Prijedor is not Srebrenica? In Srebrenica, you find no good Serbs. In Prijedor, most victims will explain that there were good Serbs who helped them. Even people who were guards in camps, a lot of them. So maybe one criteria is this disappearance of those people who can escape. But why who succeed to escape brutality? But is it because they all became brutals, or is it because they really escaped? And contrary to the idea that all people follow situations and end up being perpetrators, we have to not forget that in the war in Bosnia, 50% of Serbs did not go to the army. And among them, many of them left the army and just became deserters. They just went away. And so there was a real shortage of men in the army. which explained that they ended up with, militias or people of this kind. I'm not saying that they are all good people, but the situation was nearly the same for all of them, but not all of them ended up in this being perpetrators. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. So interesting. Yeah, so thanks. And I found it very thought-provoking, and I had a question, but I think that as you addressed directly Paul's work, maybe Paul, you want to respond something or?
Some of the issues about situationism and so forth, I'll talk more about in paper tomorrow. I certainly don't, to use Carl Garfinkel's great phrase, I don't imagine people as cultural dopes, as social dopes, that they just react. What I'm really interested in asking you, Isabelle, is based on your own research. To what extent, holding aside questions about the situation as a cause, which I think is not the way I think about it, but the question I really want to ask, in one sense, is very straightforward. Do people take responsibility? They say, yeah, I killed these people. I just did it, right? Because one of the striking things, not just about Eichmann, but you probably know Gita Sereni's great book, Into That Darkness, where she, her profile of Stengel, who was the commandant at Treblinka, right? And Stengel's position, at least as Sereni presents it, is, well, yeah, I was there, but yeah, is that really my fault? And you find this in the Browning produces very similar testimony from people he looks at and so forth. So I'm just kind of curious, based on your own research, do people in your case, do the people just come out and say, yeah, I killed him, end of story, or is there a distancing of responsibility?
Well, there is always distancing of responsibility, because they are. I spoke to them after the war, and not during the war when they were in power, And even during the war, I was not part of the Serb, little circle where you are going to come back and say, well, yeah, I killed a bunch of them. So I think it's very important to take into account the context in which the people actually talk. And what is actually very interesting is to see after the war, the proximity between what the kind of defense, and there is an enormous need of justification. What I would say, what is common and which is going against the idea that there is no reason. No, they absolutely need to find justification, whether it's excuses or whatever, but there is an endless need of justification, which actually explained that I could meet all of them, whereas normally they do not want, because they do not want to meet journalists. But when I say I was a philosopher, they accepted to see me. And because they, like if I was, playing the role of the priest or whatever. So the context of post-war is completely different from the context of war, but because they were in jail. And the process of though they had been charged and convicted for certain issues, none of them for murder. they were the one I met were not charged for murder because they spent like 3-5 years in jail. If they had been convicted for a lot of murders, I would not. They would still be in jail probably. Also, I have to admit that some of them were released later and were well known for being extremely violent, even in civil times, and I did not rush to meet them. I have to admit, I checked that they were, you know, the kind of people who are normal in normal times. But what is actually interesting is to see how the legal defense has an effect on their civil defense. That they were talking to me or to people using the same kind of argument they had used in court. And you could say, well, either it's because they were sincere in court, or it's because their defense lawyers ended up having an influence on them, or I mean, there are also cases where they were completely, one case where they were going apart for their defense in court. But then you have to take into account another aspect which you didn't have in Nuremberg. In Bosnia, they were guilty pleas. And the people were, you know, very much pushed to plead guilty to have a reduction of their sentence. So one of them pleaded guilty for several reasons, because you could frame in the dilemma of the prisoner, because the people were co-accused were pleaded guilty, but he was saying, no, I'm not guilty. But the question is not so much what are they going to tell me about the reality of the crimes. It's everything they are going to say. Either it has been proven by the court, but you cannot rely on what they are going to tell me about the reality of the crime. What is much more interesting is the level of and type of legitimacy they are going to use, and how they can play on common morality, patriotism. So it's more the interplay of what kind of moral legitimation can be used rather than the reality. I mean, it would be very naive to expect that they are going to tell in court, incriminating things that they didn't say in court. And I don't think that the interview is a good or the work of a social scientist, except if you're a historian and you have access to archives, is a good way to address the reality of the crimes. We don't have the clues. I mean, we don't have the method. I think there are questions by Daniel and John.
Yes, John,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is the high level question that Paul passed on, but I'm wondering why you think it, I'm finding it a little mysterious that you talk of situational causes as mysterious. Now, I'm not going to try and define situation. I'm Aquinian. I wouldn't try and define chair. But I think I can tell the difference between some kinds of situations. So here I am at a Zoom talk. I'm sitting in my office chair. I'm nodding sagely. I raise my little virtual hand. Tonight I go to a rock concert and I drink and dance and call for my favorite songs. And then now is there causal? The difference is unmysterious. Is there causal talk? Well, it depends on what you mean by causation. But so I say, well, maybe what about a counterfactual theory of causation? And then I say, Doris wouldn't have been drinking and dancing and calling for his favorite song if he wasn't at a rock concert. And that seems to me to be a completely on its face. There's lots of nuances about causation and explanation. On its face, it's completely unproblematic causal explanation, right? There doesn't seem to be anything sneaky or mysterious about it at all. It's the kind of thing we do all the time. I turned on the air conditioner because it was hot. So I'm wondering what makes that kind of very familiar talk mysterious.
I did not use the term mysterious about situation. I say that it was a transportation of the argument of the same situation from the German context to the Bosnian context in Srebrenica, which remained mysterious because so I wasn't saying it was mysterious. I'm saying
maybe it's a talking past then. If you didn't say that there was a problem with situational causes, then we agree. I thought I heard you say there was a problem with situational cause.
No, I'm saying there's a problem. I just think that the talk of a situation doesn't say anything else than we did it or we did not do it. Because
I just added something.
Can I finish a sentence? Can I finish a sentence? It's annoying. I mean, you ask a question and you not let me answer.
Apologies.
Okay. What counts as being the same situation or not the same situation? If we say we did the same thing because we were in the same situation, or we did not do the same thing because we were not in the same situation. Being in the same situation or not in the same situation is just a way of rephrasing we did it or we did not do it. It has no additional explanatory power because being in the same situation is supposed to explain why we did the same thing. But if we did not do the same thing, are you going to say, well, we were in the same situation, but we did not do the same thing? So the situation has no explanatory power, or we were not in the same situation. Since we don't have such a strong enough definition of situation to know if Priedo and Srebrenica are the same situation, war situation, or that Srebrenica and Žepa, few days, few kilometers away, same actors, same period, are not or are the same situation, it has no explanatory power. There was a genocide in Srebrenica, not in Žepa. So it's just a way of rephrasing we did it or we did not do it with the illusion of an explanation.
So in that account also applies to, so the simple rock concert story, when I say I did it because I was at a rock concert, it's just to say I did it.
You did it in those circumstances. The situation doesn't explain anything. It's something else, but it's not a situation.
Okay.
There is something specific. The situation is just a word that gives you the illusion of an explanation. That's all what I meant. I'm not saying that in certain circumstances, but which circumstance? Situation is just too vague.
I just have a follow-up question.
No, sorry, Raphael. There was a question by Daniel.
Yeah, but I just wanted to have a follow-up. So on
okay, okay, sorry.
So I have, because I'm bugged by this genderis in the concert situation. So I'm wondering whether you could not take into account the fact that there are different types of persons also and types of situations. So for instance, if genderis goes to the concert, so then he goes very happy. If I go to the same concert, I will go very sad. So the situation explains why I'm sad at this moment and not sad as at another moment, but you should have two parameters so that it's explanatory, a personal parameter and a situational parameter. And then it's not just empty explanation, because you say something that is counterfactual, both about the situation regarding me and about the difference between.
Change the word, talk about persons. Think that we can count. I mean, I have nothing. I mean, if you can make it clear what counts as a situation very precisely so that we can count it and it is the same or not, then it's okay. But if not, I don't know.
So I think there is also like numerical identity of the situation. So if we are the same concerts, we have the same situation without having, without needing a resemblance relation, because you have just one situation for many
Yeah,
people.
but you know what? The notion of situation to explain that I'm doing the exact same thing I'm doing right now because I'm talking to you in this situation is useless. I mean, we are trying to explain certain actions and genocides. So I don't even see your point.
Yeah, so I guess I'm thinking about explanation in a contrastive way. So if you contrast, if you want to explain my behavior, you have to contrast two situations.
Yes, but then there are very precise things to be contrasted. Who are the victims? Who are the perpetrators? How did they end up there? That's why I was talking about good Serbs or bad Serbs, or the population among the Serbs is not the same at the beginning of the war and at the end. Many people just went away, just like among the victims. So if the people present are the situation, that we are not in the same situation. So what counts? It's a location, it is a time, it is a time frame, it is the real number of people killed, the way of killing. If you don't have that, I cannot compare.
Okay, it's sorry.
Yeah, Daniel, I think Daniel.
So mine can be brief, and it's not really a question, it's a note of appreciation. But I would just like to say, Isabella, that I really appreciate the perspective that you're taking on episodes. That episodes they're not like eggs in a carton of eggs, all the same. So if one egg is rotten, then they're all rotten. What I'm hearing your talk to really emphasize is the importance of paying attention to the specifics of an episode, and not to assume that there's going to be a general explanation, a general motivation, a general, possibly a general situation which accounts for the outcome. And I think it's really excellent advice for both the sociologist and the historian to not come with the presupposition that if Jabłabne, the village described by Jan Gross, if that involved a sudden massive outpouring of murderous killing by neighbors, that we should then expect that the next village over is also prone to that killing. And in fact, it didn't happen. So there's something different about Jabłabne that needed to be understood. So what I'm applauding, what I'm celebrating and appreciating in your talk is the idea that to understand these evil events, it's really necessary to pay a lot of attention to the details. Situations come into it. I think there is a meaning to the idea of a situation.
Yeah, there is a meaning. Just
it's a stereotype that just, then fits every, or conceivably every incident. Rather, pay attention to the incident, pay attention to the particular characteristics, and understand what the actors are doing and what the circumstances are that they're responding to. Just a comment.
Just to I think that historians are very aware of those differences, and that it's a business of historians to talk about specific villages, specific places, specific people. And it doesn't mean that they are not able to generalize, but they do it very, very carefully, trying to explain that Eichmann is not, I don't know, Pol Pot. And then I think what is important in the historical method for me, it's not only this sense of particularity that I mean, I was talking about Srebrenica and Jepa because it's very interesting. You have a genocide in Srebrenica, and a few days later, few kilometers away, you have nearly the same situation, few changes. And that is, the changes are very important. It depends. You have the same perpetrators, nearly the same victims. Where is the difference? The difference is in the type of landscape. It's easier to escape to Serbia. The difference is in the blue helmets who are on the ground, who are more ready to oppose Mladic in Jepa. Tiny, very tiny differences. But what is interesting is it is and it is not the same situation. So situation has very limited power of explanation in that case. But there are 8,000, between 8,000 and 10,000 killed people in Srebrenica, 100 in Jepa. So this idea of prediction that we would expect, well, it doesn't always work. And even, I mean, in at the beginning of the war, you can see that there are differences, important differences between the municipalities in Bosnia, because there were, you know, Bosnia was a place of self-management. You heard about that. Well, they practiced self-management for genocide, I mean, for mass crime. All the municipalities were in a general framework. They could apply the orders in their own way, and you find significant differences according to the places. So what counts? And so I think that what is important for us is this sense of the relevant either circumstances, factors, but also this historical method, which is extremely useful. And the method is to use judicial sources with a particular method. You do not use historical sources as a proof of the event. I mean, if there is an archive of the time, yes. If there is a count of bodies, yes. But if you have a defense, an accusation, it's not, it is a defense, an accusation. We are in a domain of justification. Not and it's a particular domain. It's not the one of describing an event.
If I may take 5 more minutes for asking a question, clarification. I have the impression that we could understand your claim in 2 ways. So I think that you're criticizing the universalist attempt, the generalization attempt to have the big theory about why do people behave bad, do evil things. And I think that's I think that's one of the reasons why we want a general theory is for a practical reason, because we want that it doesn't happen again. And if we have like a numerological deductive theory of evil, then we can intervene in the future and avoid that future genocide happens. So I think it's something that is behind Paul's, I'm pretty sure that it's something that is behind Paul's paper. And so I think this is very important because this is why we want to understand what is going on. It's not just to know what happened in the past. We want to prevent that it happens again in the future, like also Dan said. So I think in the universe claim is very, the drive behind it is very important. So even if as you claim for epistemological reason, we should be very careful about universalism because we cannot extrapolate from one situation to another, and that this can lead to mistakes, and we should take into account situations. So I think that there might be a middle way, because we can understand your claim as a negative claim, but in the affirmative, you could assert 2 things. You could say everything is singular, so everything is historical. So, and there is another way, it's like the Mertens way between Lazarfeld just empirical study of society and Pearson's big generalization is to try to find middle range theories, like in analytical sociology, to find these middle range models and based on case studies and to try to find similarities. And then you have not a singularist position, but a particularist position. So which is in between universalism. And then you can use this middle range model to say, okay, now we are in this kind, in the same kind of situation as, and you need to have this idea of situation as in the past. So then we should be very careful because everything is gathered for a massacre, for instance. All the elements are gathered. And then you have, at the same time, the epistemological prudence, caution, and at the same time, you can have the practical use of studying past horrors.
I'm sorry, but I just do not see the relation between the epistemological discussion on one side and the idea that you are going to prevent genocide on the other one. I mean, for me, it's a view from, I don't know. If we have a perfect theory of genocide and we can say it is genocide and we want to intervene, we are going to use the theory. But if we do not want to intervene, we are not going to use a theory and we are not going to use the word. Look what happened in Rwanda. We knew what was taking place. And it is very clear that because what you are talking about, you don't need social sciences. There is a convention for the prevention of genocide. So categorizing a situation as genocide is enough to intervene. You will qualify it as genocide if you want to intervene. And if you don't want, you will not qualify it as genocide. In Rwanda, the diplomacy completely erased the word genocide, and they knew what was happening. So it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what you are talking about. It's not because you will have this grandiose theory that we will prevent genocide. It's completely different stories.
So I'm thinking maybe more on small scale. For instance, if you have.
And sorry, I mean, I was among the people who, when there was a fall of the enclave, who said there will be a huge massacre because it's very likely from what happened in the previous year with Mladic. Wow. And so they just let it go. So
yes, this is still another problem, the problem of why do people...
No, because it's not another problem because you mix the two of them. You say we need a grandiose theory to prevent. No, it's completely different. There are a lot of institutions in charge of preventing mass crimes, genocide. There are courts. There are it's not. We do not. There is no lack of a grandiose theory. When there are enough massacres in repetition, it's a good indication that it's going to keep on. The grandiose theory is completely useless.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't say that we need a grandiose theory. I said we need a middle range theory. So
you don't need the middle range theory either.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just maybe too pessimistic, but I mean, for those of us who are older than Raphael, I mean, we saw that unfortunately the use of and there were, when there were interventions, in few cases there were interventions, but it's not because it was genocide per se, but because there was genocide in there was an intervention in for Pol Pot, but because it was completely unbalancing the situation of Vietnam. So there are other reasons. And you can have all the short term, lower terms, middle terms, universality. It's not the issue. So the question is, why do you want a universal theory? Because to be sure, it's not to prevent.
Thank you very much for your very, very interesting and thought-provoking talk. So let's clap, and
So,
thank you everyone for being here and for a great discussion, great questions, and see you tomorrow.
see you tomorrow with pleasure. So Paul, it's the beginning of the day.
The one disadvantage of being in Santa Cruz is
Yeah.
I get up